What if the quiet woman ladling soup in a dusty field tent was the deadliest marksman on the battlefield, and no one realized it until the sky began to fall? The first drone dropped like a stunned hornet, spiraling in a frantic whirl before slamming into the sand 50 meters from the mess line. No explosion, just the sharp hiss of metal cooling under the desert sun and a sudden, eerie silence. Marines froze mid-stride, trays half-raised, spoons suspended. Someone muttered that it must have been a malfunction, a rare stroke of luck. Then the second drone fell. This one didn't glide or tumble. It simply died mid-air, as if some invisible hand had reached out and crushed its wings. Dust plumed where it struck, and confusion rippled through the camp. Helmets turned, radios crackled, fingers moved toward triggers. The officers exchanged hard looks, brows tense beneath their brims. And somewhere near the back, a woman in a worn apron, hair tucked under a cap, sleeves rolled to the elbow, quietly wiped her hands on a towel and slipped away from the steaming pots. No one noticed her leave. In the Marines, rumors traveled faster than smoke. They called her Reyes. Some thought that wasn't her real name. Others didn't bother guessing at all. She arrived with a supply convoy 2 months prior, thin, calm, eyes always scanning like she was measuring every inch of the world. Paperwork said she was logistics support with a culinary assignment. A cook. Simple enough, but those who watched closely noticed things. The way she avoided cameras, the way she handled knives. Silent, controlled, never wasteful. How she disappeared for hours under the pretense of inventory checks. And how she always sat with her back to the wall, eyes angled toward the open sky instead of her plate. Still, a cook, right? Out here, between sandstorms and endless hours of boredom punctured by bursts of chaos, people grew comfortable with simplicity. She fed the Marines. She kept to herself. That was that. Until the drones came. They had a signature hum, sharp, predatory, like angry bees tangled in copper wire. The insurgents called them specters. The Marines had a less poetic term, suicide birds. Low-flying, fast and ugly, they hunted for heat signatures, radio chatter, moving bodies. They'd already hit 3 convoys that month, leaving twisted metal and uneasy hearts in their wake. So when 2 of them dropped in less than a minute without a single rocket fired, without any warning, disbelief spread like wildfire. A third one hovered into view, buzzing high over the camp perimeter. Marines ducked behind barriers, rifle barrels tracked upward. Someone cursed under their breath. Then, thwop. Almost imperceptible. A whisper more than a shot. The drone twitch-dropped, like its wiring had been severed by fate itself, and crashed into the dirt. 3 in a row. Impossible by chance. The camp went still. Even the wind paused, as if the desert itself leaned in to listen. And miles away from the mess tent, hidden between jagged rocks and tattered camouflage netting, Reyes lay flat on her stomach, cheek pressed against a matte black rifle frame. Not military issue. Too sleek. Too customized. A beast of precision. Her right eye locked through a scope that blinked with silent intelligence. Lines of data scrolling like a second heartbeat. She exhaled slowly, almost reverently. The smell of metal, dust, and warm earth filled her lungs. 4th drone incoming. She didn't smile. Reyes never smiled on the job. Instead, she adjusted a dial, tiny and deliberate like a pianist tuning silence itself. Her finger met the trigger with a practiced tenderness, and the rifle hummed. Not loud, but deep, as though the earth itself recognized the weapon. Thwop. Another drone died. A hawk screeched overhead as if saluting her. Reyes gently brushed sand from the rifle barrel, her movements smooth, unhurried. Wind tugged at the netting around her. The horizon shimmered. She reached for her water canteen, sipped once, then leaned her head back, eyes closing just long enough for a breath of stillness. She never liked attention. That's why she chose this life in the shadows. Let others stand tall, metals blazing, cameras flashing. She preferred the forgotten corners, the hidden ridges, the silent perches, the places where danger whispered and only the careful could hear it. But today, Today she felt a shift. Something heavier than the desert heat. Something watching. Footsteps crunched behind her, not stealthy, but cautious. Purposeful. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. "You can drop the camo," a voice said, low and steady. The kind of voice built from command and long-buried fear. She blinked once. So they had finally noticed. Reyes rolled her shoulders subtly, signaling the rifle to power down. The tiny screen dimmed, returning to black like a beast going dormant. She peeled back the camo mesh and looked up into the sun-bleached face of Captain Harlow. Broad shoulders, jaw clenched, eyes like flint. He tipped his helmet back just enough to study her more clearly. "You been shooting down our problems, specialist?" Cook. Logistics tech. Paperwork ghost. 1,000 forgettable labels. But specialist. That was closer to the truth, close enough to sting. She met his gaze. "Drones are a threat to the camp, sir." Harlow scanned the equipment. The precision marks in the sand, the empty shell casings no bigger than grain husks. His brow tightened. "That rifle isn't standard issue." Reyes said nothing. "We've had snipers through this base for years," he continued. "Not one could hit that metal swarm like you just did." Again, silence. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and burned fuel from somewhere far beyond the horizon. Harlow lowered his voice. "Who sent you? Not what are you doing, not where did you get this gear. Who sent you?" He already knew she wasn't just a cook. He just didn't know how deep the layers went. Reyes didn't answer him. Not with words. Instead, she slid her canteen into her pack, folded the mesh netting, and stood slowly. Her movements were patient, respectful. The captain didn't raise his weapon. He didn't need to. Power is quiet when it's certain of itself. "You're not on any roster," he murmured. "And yet here you are." She adjusted her sleeves back down her arms, hiding the faint mark near her wrist. Not a tattoo, too crisp and clean for ink. More like a brand. A symbol etched in heat and purpose. A unit that didn't officially exist. A task group whispered about in after-action reports and then blacked out with unforgiving ink. Ghost shooters, precision specters, soldiers who entered conflict zones wearing no flag and left behind nothing except the absence of threats. Reyes looked him in the eyes for the first time. Whatever he expected to find, fear, arrogance, apology, he didn't find it. Only duty. Quiet, heavy, unspoken. Harlow exhaled. "My men think you're the cook." "I am," she replied softly, "when I need to be." The captain let out a dry breath, half disbelief, half reluctant admiration. "Intel says enemy operator nest 27 kilometers east. Launch team, mobile, quick. You planning on dropping all their toys one at a time?" She reached up and tightened her cap. "One at a time works just fine." He narrowed his eyes. "You're taking this personal." "No," she said. "I'm taking it necessary." Far below them, the camp buzzed with alarms and hurried boots. Marines questioned each other, wondering what miracle had saved them. A radio squawked. Someone shouted orders. Someone else prayed quietly. Reyes slung the rifle across her shoulder and stepped past the captain. He didn't stop her, but his hand brushed hers briefly, rough glove to scarred knuckle, a gesture halfway between warning and approval. "You walk out there alone and you won't come back," he said. She paused, turning just enough for the sunlight to catch the edge of her eyes, cool, unwavering, carved from something unyielding. "That depends on who's waiting." Harlow's jaw flexed, a muscle twitch that gave away more than he meant to. "You're good, but you're not invincible." "No," she murmured. "Just necessary." Sand drifted around her boots as she moved. Behind her, the captain called out, voice firm, almost human. "When you get back," he said, "I want the truth." She didn't turn. "If I get back," she replied, and with that she stepped beyond the ridge, disappearing into the folding heat of the desert. The wind swallowed her shape, leaving only the whisper of fabric and the faint, fading hum of a weapon, still remembering the warmth of battle. In the distance, another drone whined. High, searching, hungry. Reyes didn't look up. She already knew it was coming. She already knew it would fall. But the question wasn't whether she could bring it down. The question was whether she was still the only hunter in the sky. And somewhere far across the desert, something moved in answer. Heat shimmered on the horizon like the desert was breathing. Reyes walked into it without hesitation, each step dissolving her into a mirage of grit and purpose. Behind her, the camp shrank to a cluster of muted shapes, voices replaced by wind, structure replaced by wilderness. Out here there were no ranks, no titles, only intentions, only hunters and hunted. She counted her breaths. 10 paces, 20, 30. The world reduced to heartbeat and sand. To anyone watching, it would have looked like she was simply walking across emptiness. But Reyes wasn't walking blindly. She traced an invisible map in her mind. Wind vectors, terrain dips, known patrol routes, paths of least noise. Patterns she had memorized before ever stepping foot in this theater. Her unit trained for places like this, places where time itself felt hostile. Half a kilometer out, she slowed. Dust kicked where something small scurried. Lizard, maybe. Or a sensor trigger disguised as nature. She crouched, fingertips brushing the ground. The sand was too disturbed, too loose, not natural. A buried seismic ear. Basic but effective. She stepped wide around it, stepped soft enough to not even disturb the surface. Her shadows stayed long and slender, her rifle tight against her side like a secret that could never drop. Somewhere above she heard it again, the faint angry buzz of a drone scouting the wind. Different sound this time. Lighter, shorter frequency pulse. Recon, not strike. Smaller wingspan. It circled wide, cautious. They were searching for her, so someone had seen the fallen drones after all. Someone who understood precision kills. Someone who knew these machines didn't just drop from prayer and luck. Reyes didn't look up. Looking up could give away angle. Control wasn't always firing first, it was knowing when not to move. The drone passed overhead. Its shadow skimmed across her boots like a cold hand. But it kept going. Not yet locked. Not yet sure. She pressed forward. The sun dipped slightly, turning the sky a bleached gold. Her throat was dry, but she resisted the canteen. Small comforts bred carelessness. She needed edge. She needed thirst. Skirmish lines from past patrols littered the ground. Boot treads, tire grooves, a burned scrap of fabric half buried in sand. Memory etched into terrain. Places like this didn't forget violence. They just disguised it under dust. 30 minutes passed. Maybe 40. The human mind loses sense of time where there's no sound except the whisper of feet in sand and the occasional wing beat of a scavenging bird. And in that quiet, memory forced itself forward. A shooting range at dusk. Steel plates painted white. An instructor leaning close, breath harsh. You don't shoot to kill, Reyes. Killing is what amateurs think is the point. You shoot to erase threat, to correct imbalance. She had nodded, too young to fully understand, old enough to never forget. A crack split the silence. She hit the ground instantly, rifle angled, but it wasn't gunfire. It was the snap of a breaking branch. Ridiculous. No trees, no brush, not here. She narrowed her eyes. It wasn't nature. It was mimicry. Someone signaling. Another soft pop. Then silence. Her pulse slowed. Not fear. Calculation. Then, like a mirage resolving, a shape pulled itself from the low dune to her right, rising fluidly like sand, sculpting itself into human form. Ghillie patterns blended perfectly with terrain, far better than local insurgents would ever manage. Reyes didn't lift her weapon, neither did the figure. A voice, filtered, female, steady. Long way from a kitchen agent. Reyes didn't flinch, but the air thickened. Not a local fighter, not one of Harlow's Marines. No sloppy posture, no amateur breathing rhythm. This was a ghost, one of hers, or worse, someone from the other side of the same shadow war. She didn't answer. Answers cost information. The woman tilted her head, analyzing. Thought they retired you, or buried you. Hard to keep track. Reyes finally spoke, voice low enough to blend with wind. Same could be said about you. A pause. A slow smile like sunlight glinting off a blade. Call sign is Viper now. Names aren't useful out here. Viper. Reyes remembered that name. Rumors only. A sniper unit gone black after a mission gone wrong. Operatives scattered. Some reabsorbed. Some vanished. Some turned mercenary. Ghosts breaking off to haunt new shadows. Reyes's grip tensed slightly, barely noticeable. A threat like Viper didn't appear by chance. You're hunting their launch crew? Viper asked softly. Reyes studied her face. No sweat. No anxious tics. Perfect breathing. She already knew the answer. This was probing, not curiosity. They're expanding range, Reyes said. They'll target refugee corridors next. Viper exhaled in amusement. Still fighting for people who will never know your name. You don't change. You changed, Reyes countered. Viper's jaw twitched. Not anger. Memory. They abandoned us, Viper said, voice frayed at the edges. Used us, erased us, then pretended their perfect little program never existed. You walked away, Reyes corrected. There's a difference. The difference is who still believes the lie. The wind paused. For a moment, the desert felt like an arena. Two predators circling inside silence too fragile to break. Another small buzz approached. Another recon drone. This one closer. Hungrier. Viper's eyes flicked toward it. Your Marines aren't ready for what's coming. They're not my Marines. But you came when they were in danger. Reyes moved her thumb across her rifle's sensor pad. Slowly. Deliberately. I came because I was needed. Still making excuses for loyalty. Reyes didn't respond. Loyalty wasn't a word she used. Duty was cleaner. The drone crept overhead. Viper remained upright, unbothered, as if she trusted her camouflage to make her invisible to metal eyes. Reyes knew better. These new specters didn't need sight. They tasted algorithms, tracked heat gradients, listened to heartbeats in sand. Reyes whispered, "Down." Viper didn't move. Her pride was a wall. Her training, once identical to Reyes, now shackled by ego, by betrayal. Reyes didn't think. She reacted. A silent pulse from her rifle. Frequency disruptor, not projectile. The drone jerked mid-flight, sensors scrambled, and veered off course into the dunes with a muted crash. Dust drifted. Viper stared at her. The ghost mask cracked just enough to reveal surprise. Maybe gratitude. Maybe anger she needed saving. You're compromised, Viper whispered. Too much empathy. You're compromised, Reyes replied. Too much anger. Viper shifted, weight redistributing, the kind of shift that meant decision. Fight or walk away, not friend, not enemy, something between, something dangerous. Then, distant rumble. Engines, heavy, multiple. The kind of movement that didn't belong to lone insurgents. Convoy grade, armored perhaps. Viper angled her head. They're not amateurs anymore. Reyes responded with steady calm. I know. You can't stop them alone. Reyes looked past her towards the sound rolling like thunder across the sand. Sunlight caught on something, metal glimmering far away. A convoy, drone carriers, launch rails. Enough infrastructure to rain fire on villages, supply routes, camps, anything alive. Viper's voice dropped to a whisper. They're using ex-military tech. Same signals, same encryption layers we trained on. Meaning, someone fed them systems they shouldn't have. Meaning, the enemy wasn't just insurgents. Someone bigger, someone back-channeling weapons. Maybe a rogue state, maybe private contractors. Maybe a hidden hand that liked war quiet and profitable. Reyes's heartbeat stayed level. But inside her chest, something tightened. This wasn't just another mission, it was a ghost trail leading back to the same program she came from. You don't have to do this, Viper murmured. You walk away now, no one will blame you. They'll think you evaporated into the sand like the rest of us. Reyes stared forward. I'm not here to be remembered. Then why are you here? Reyes lifted her rifle, not aiming, just holding, grounding herself in the weight of purpose. Because someone has to be. Viper closed her eyes just once, long enough to feel something cracks through her steel. They will eat you alive, Reyes. The engine noise grew. Dust plumes rose like storm clouds, figures on ridgelines. They were coming. Soon, this quiet standoff would erupt. Reyes stepped back, positioning herself for cover. Viper didn't stop her this time. You're fighting a war that doesn't have a side anymore, Viper said. It wasn't taunt. It was grief. Reyes met her gaze, calm, unyielding. Then I'll fight for the space between sides. Silence, thick as oil. And then, unexpectedly, Viper spoke again, softer, barely audible. You were always the best of us. That's why I hated you. Reyes didn't answer. There was nothing to say to truth like that. The first armored vehicle crested the distant ridge. Black flag insignias painted over previous military markings. Satellite uplink dish rotated, scanning. Reyes's pulse sharpened. She sighted through her scope, not to fire yet, but to see. Operators, full harness, Western gear. One figure in particular, tall, controlled, issuing orders with a hand signal Reyes knew too well. That gesture, that posture. The past she buried stood on that ridge wearing enemy colors. Breath left her lungs slow and cold. Viper followed her line of sight. Saw the same figure, stiffened. Is that? Yes. A ghost from the same unit. Long dead, or so reports claimed. Now alive. Leading the weapon pipeline. Feeding the drones. Feeding destruction. The desert felt too small. The horizon too close. The sun too bright on the truth. Viper's voice trembled, barely. If he's alive, then everything they told us. Reyes inhaled. Sand carried across her face like time itself shifting. They lied. The convoy started to fan out. Formation expanding. Preparing to deploy drones. War wasn't coming. It was already here. And as Reyes steadied her rifle, eyes narrowing, pulse quiet as a prayer, she realized something deep and unnerving. This wasn't a hunt anymore. This was a reckoning. And she couldn't tell anymore if she was the predator or the prey. The horizon trembled with heat and threat, a mirage of war sharpening into reality. Reyes steadied her breath, the rifle balanced against her shoulder like a quiet confession she had carried too long. The convoy below fanned out with predatory precision, vehicles angled, hatches cracking open, silhouettes moving with the smooth discipline of professionals, not insurgents, not amateurs, operators, trained, hardened, coordinated, and one man, familiar silhouette, familiar stillness directing them, once a ghost like her, once believed dead, the kind of death that wasn't a burial, but an erasure, the kind they wrote in black ink on sealed files no one was meant to open again, the kind that should have been hers too. Her heartbeat merged with the wind, slow and disciplined, each breath a calculation. She had seen the impossible before. She had lived through it. But seeing a ghost wear the colors of chaos, seeing him alive in the skin of the enemy, ripped something quiet inside her. A thread that had held so many memories together. Viper crouched nearby, no longer posing, no longer hiding behind the arrogance of a survivor scorned. Her voice was a soft fracture in the desert air. Tell me you didn't know. Reyes didn't answer. The truth was a blade, double-edged, gleaming. She hadn't known, but she had feared. Some nights, in the hollow between duty and sleep, she wondered if the program that made her could ever truly die. If ghosts could ever rest. If she could. The wind shifted, carrying the metallic scent of fuel and the dry punishment of the desert. Sand rasped against the steel frame of her weapon. A signal tower rose on the nearest vehicle, rotating, searching. Everything about this formation felt wrong. Too sophisticated, too expensive, too organized for local insurgency. "What are they doing?" Viper whispered. Reyes magnified the scope. Small cases being unloaded. Cylinders, antenna arrays, crates marked with coded military identifiers stripped of national flag. This wasn't a strike team. It was infrastructure. Deployment. Expansion. "They're building a relay," Reyes said. "Long-range network, autonomized targeting." "To hit who?" Reyes didn't blink. "Everyone who stands between them and the sky." Viper swallowed hard, voice thinning. "We trained for this, so they could fight wars no one wanted to admit existed. But this isn't covert security." Reyes' jaw set like carved stone. "This is ownership." A beat of silence, heavy, searing. "Who are they working for?" Viper asked. Reyes kept her eye to the scope, tracking movement, reading body language, mapping threat layers. Not who. What? The world had shifted while they hid in shadows. Governments didn't just fight wars anymore. Networks did. Corporations did. Algorithms did. And somewhere in the machinery of secrecy, someone had decided that soldiers like her were still assets, tools, ghosts that could be resurrected without consent. And if ghosts could be resurrected, they could also be redirected. She felt Viper watching her, not with suspicion, but with the fragile hope of someone searching for certainty in the one person who once represented it. "He was part of our unit," Viper said. "He died. I saw the file." Reyes didn't look away from the scope. "Files lie. And you knew that, didn't you?" Reyes finally shifted her gaze, meeting Viper's eyes. "We were trained to trust missions, not reports." The admission hung between them like exposed nerve. The convoy below started positioning jamming nodes. 3 black-winged micro-drones shot into the air like angry sparks, slicing through heat waves with surgical grace. Not hostile yet, not curious either. They weren't searching for her specifically. They were claiming air, territory, perimeter. A new sound rolled across the desert, low, resonating through bone rather than ear. A carrier engine deeper and stronger than the others. A command vehicle emerging. And behind it, a second convoy cresting the opposite ridge. Viper inhaled sharply. "They're flanking the camp." Reyes froze, not from fear but calculation. The Marines, the unknowing, the young men and women who joked at lunch, who thought courage was loud, who believed a cook could simply be a cook. Time fractured, choices narrowed. She could warn the camp, sprint back, break cover, risk interception. Or she could stay. Neutralize the threat at the root. Strike before the net closed. 2 missions, 2 worlds. One invisible war that the surface world still believed was simple, patriotic, clean, a voice from memory, an old commander, faceless in dream. You don't choose the battlefield, only the truth you fight for. Viper leaned close, voice trembling for the first time. "Tell me you won't go back for them." Reyes answered without hesitation. "I won't leave them blind. That's how they keep you controlled," Viper hissed. "Duty is the leash." "Duty is the anchor," Reyes corrected. "Not the chain." For the first time, Viper looked at her not as a rival or a betrayal, but as a mirror she hated and needed. "If you warn them, you lose the element of surprise." "If I don't warn them," Reyes replied, "I lose myself." Before Viper could answer, a crackle of encrypted sound hissed faintly through Reyes's earpiece. A channel she hadn't touched in years, long silent, decommissioned, classified beyond classified, and now, alive. Her blood thinned with cold disbelief. "That's impossible." The voice that came through wasn't hers, and it wasn't calling her, it was commanding. "Eyes on target. Operative confirmed. Initiate retrieval protocol." Retrieval, not elimination. Retrieval meant belonging, claimed asset, owned soldier. Viper's eyes widened. "They're calling you back." Reyes clenched her jaw. They don't get to. Not anymore. A new tone cracked through. Closer, emotional, jagged. Reyes, if you can hear me, stand down. We don't want to harm you. Harlow. The Marines had intercepted the transmission, or someone fed them a version of it. Either way, they were coming. Into a battlefield they didn't understand. Into a shadow where rules turned feral. Viper whispered, stunned. They already know who you are. No, Reyes said. They think they do. Below, the resurrected ghost, her former unit mate, lifted binoculars toward her ridge. He froze, focus tightening, recognition blooming. They locked eyes across a canyon of years, betrayals, unspoken wars. And he smiled. It was small, almost gentle, the way a predator acknowledges another apex rival in the tall grass. Viper exhaled, horror dawning. He's not here to fight you. He's here to bring you home. Reyes whispered, I don't have a home. The ghost below lifted a hand, slow, open, summoning, a gesture, one she had once responded to without thought, a command disguised as invitation. Reyes' pulse spiked, not panic but rage. Cold, disciplined rage forged from years of obedience she never questioned until the silence of freedom forced reflection. She lowered the rifle. Viper stiffened. Don't you dare. I'm not surrendering. Then what are you doing? Reyes breathed once, steady and absolute. I'm choosing. She aimed, past the ghost, past the convoy, at a relay node powering the drone network. The shot wouldn't kill anyone, but it would start something no one here could stop once released. Viper whispered, This will make you their enemy. I was never their equal. Reyes squeezed. Silence broke like glass. The node ruptured. Sparks sprayed. Systems screeched. Drones jerked mid-air like puppets cut from strings. Chaos snapped awake. Shouts. Engines roaring. Figures scattering. The ghost below stiffened, surprise cracking his calm. He stared at her. Hurt, anger, something like admiration. And lowered his summoning hand. He didn't signal attack. He signaled pursuit. Reyes grabbed her pack. We move. Viper hesitated, caught between past loyalties and present truth. Come with me, Reyes said. Viper's voice shook. I don't trust you. You don't have to. Just trust the alternative less. A beat. Then Viper nodded once. They ran, shadows slicing through sun-seared rock, breath sharp, boots pounding ancient sand. Behind them, drones screamed back to life. Engines roared. War woke fully. And Reyes felt the truth settle in her bones with brutal clarity. She wasn't just hunted. She wasn't just remembered. She was claimed. But claims could be broken. As the first missile streaked toward the ridge she had just abandoned, a single thought cut through the roar like steel. If they were resurrecting ghosts, then she wasn't the only one who had crawled out of a grave. And whatever came next, she wasn't fighting to survive. She was fighting to decide who she was when the shadows came to collect. But a darker question rose behind it, unbidden, cold, inevitable. If she severed every chain, duty, loyalty, past, what would be left of her when the dust finally settled? Sand exploded behind them as the missile hit, sending a shockwave rolling across the dunes like the desert itself had taken a violent breath. Reyes didn't turn. Turning meant hesitation, and hesitation was death. She sprinted, lungs burning, rifle tight against her, the world narrowing to motion and instinct. Viper ran beside her. No longer a shadow rival, but a figure bound to the same flame, same betrayal, same impossible truth. The sky above buzzed, drones slicing through heat shimmer like metal wasps angry at losing control. Data link signals crackled, hunting, searching, learning. Reyes felt each pulse like a ghost tapping the back of her skull. She had severed their link. She had said no to the hand that built her. And machines never forgot rebellion. Ahead, a ridge split the terrain, jagged rock thrusting up from endless sand like bone breaking through skin. Shelter, cover, or a trap. Her breath steadied, not from ease but from training. Fear came. Always. The skill was making it quiet. They slid behind stone as another drone strafed the air above, scanning infrared signatures, sniffing for heat. Reyes pressed her cheek to rough rock, breathing shallow, heartbeat sinking with dust swirling near her boots. Viper's voice was almost soundless. They won't let you go. They never let anyone go. They let me. Viper's tone cracked on the lie. Reyes met her gaze. They lost you. That isn't the same. Viper blinked like the truth stung worse than shrapnel. A pause. Wind scraped the rocks, sand whispering against their skin. The world went quiet enough to hear the electric hum of rotors and the distant rumble of engines regrouping. They're adapting, Reyes murmured. She could feel it. A pattern shift. Their pursuit was recalibrating, not blind aggression, but strategy. They weren't rushing. They were watching, herding her toward a line she hadn't seen yet. Viper lifted her head a fraction, studying the horizon. How far are you willing to go? Reyes didn't blink. Whatever distance they think I won't. Viper exhaled a laugh. Not amused, not bitter, but hollow. Always the righteous one. Reyes checked her magazine. Not righteous, just unwilling to belong. Viper's voice softened. You did belong once. Once. Silence stretched, heavy with unspoken memories. Training yards at dawn. Whispered orders. Cold steel. Warm laughter that was never loud because ghosts didn't draw attention. Her unit had been family in the only way ghosts could love. Quiet, fierce, incomplete. Until one mission shattered them like glass under boot. A low beep cut through memory. Drone scanning beam. Reyes pressed lower. She whispered to herself more than to Viper. This was never about loyalty. It was about purpose. And now? Viper asked. Reyes's voice was steady, but inside something trembled, small and human. Now it's about truth. A shape crested the ridge opposite them, dust haloed, silhouette clear even in heat shimmer. Not a drone, a person. Alone. He moved with purpose, not frantic, not hesitant. A quiet inevitability in his stride. The resurrected ghost. Viper stiffened. He followed us on foot. Why would he? He wants me alive, Reyes murmured. Alive. Collected. Folded back into a machine that wore human faces and called obedience a virtue. Reyes rose slowly. Viper grabbed her wrist, panic flickering. Don't. He'll mark your position. He already has. Reyes stepped from cover just enough to be seen, not enough to be exposed. The wind tugged at her cap, at loose strands of hair sticking to sweat. The desert tasted like dust and ending. The man stopped across the ravine. Distance between them still safe, but psychological distance collapsing in on itself. He didn't raise a weapon. He didn't shout. He simply lifted a hand, an open palm, command masked as concern. The same gesture she once obeyed without thinking. His voice carried through a directional speaker, low and clear, the kind that wrapped itself around a person like memory. Reyes. Her name sounded like a summons carved from years she tried to bury. You didn't have to run. She kept her rifle pointed downward, ready, controlled. I didn't run. You fled the program. I survived it. You were never abandoned. Reyes's jaw set. No, we were owned. A pause. Then, you misunderstand what we are. We? She echoed. You speak for them now. For us. He corrected softly. For what we were built to do. Behind him, drones hovered, silent, like obedient wolves waiting for a hand signal. Reyes' pulse stayed steady, but her muscles thrummed with a violent calm. The mission ended. No, he said gently. The world changed. The mission evolved. The mission was justice. No, the mission was stability. She heard the shift. The ideology laid bare. Stability meant control. Order without consent. Peace without freedom. Viper whispered behind her, voice shaking in something like horror. They aren't fighting for countries anymore. They're fighting for a system that doesn't admit it exists. Reyes didn't turn. They always were. The ghost tilted his head. Come back. We need you. Need, she repeated, quiet but razor sharp. You don't ask, you claim. Because you belong with us. No. Her voice was steel. I belong where I choose. His expression didn't change. That was almost worse than anger. Absence of it. Calculation. He gestured slightly. No threat. Just inevitability. You can't win alone. Reyes stepped forward, boots sinking slightly into sand. Watch me. His eyes, once familiar, once trusted, darkened with something mournful. If you continue, you'll force us to treat you as hostile. You already did. A wind gust swept between them, lifting sand like burning ashes. The sky dimmed slightly, not from weather, but from machines adjusting formation overhead. A long breath passed. He lowered his hand. Then the world loses one of its best. Reyes whispered, The world never knew me. That, he replied, was the point. The words hit harder than bullets. Ghosts didn't exist to be honored. They existed to be erased when inconvenient. Behind the man, engines roared. The second convoy was advancing, and from the opposite direction, dust rising. Vehicles, Harlow's Marines, coming straight into the jaws of war they couldn't see. Reyes's chest tightened, two forces converging, one blind, one merciless. She was the hinge between them. If she warned Harlow, she exposed herself fully. If she didn't, the Marines died ignorant in a battle that wasn't theirs. Viper's whisper broke beside her, raw and metallic. We can still disappear, we can walk away from all of them, live in the quiet. There is no quiet, Reyes murmured. Not for us. A drone dipped lower, scanning, anticipating. The desert felt like a held breath. Viper touched her shoulder, voice cracking. Then choose survival. Reyes closed her eyes, just long enough to feel the weight of everything. The life she didn't choose. The death she refused. The truth carved into her bones like code. She spoke without opening them. Survival isn't the same as living. When she opened her eyes again, the world sharpened, faded, electric. She lifted her rifle not at the ghost but at the sky, at the system that thought it owned her. Her finger rested, patient, poised. The ghost across the ravine saw her choice and exhaled, almost tender, almost proud, almost broken. So be it. Engines thundered, drones descended, Marines crested the far ridge, and time held itself still. The desert wind quieted, as if the earth was bracing, as if it knew the moment just before something breaks is the most fragile of all. Reyes whispered to the horizon, not prayer, not threat, but truth. I'm not returning to the shadows. For the first time, the ghost's voice slipped from certainty. Then who will you be, Reyes? Her heart answered before her mouth did. Someone neither side was ready for. But before she spoke, before the first shot of the storm fired, a sharp crack split the air. Not gunfire, not drone ignition, something else. A flare from the Marine convoy, a warning, a call. They had seen her. They were signaling her. And the realization cut through her like thunder. Harlow hadn't come to stop her. He'd come to stand between her and whatever force thought it owned her fate. The desert exhaled, and Reyes understood. The war she thought she was fighting alone was no longer hers alone, but the cost of that truth was about to arrive like a sandstorm with teeth. Dust curled around the flare's dying smoke as if the desert itself were holding its breath. For a heartbeat, everything existed in suspension. The drones circling like steel vultures. The Marines braced on the ridge, Viper's tightening grip on Reyes's sleeve, and the ghost across the ravine, the man who once shared her heartbeat across battlefields and now stared at her like she was both memory and threat. Then movement broke the stillness. A drone dipped, targeting systems locking with a mechanical hiss. The Marines snapped into formation, raising weapons not at her, not at the ghost, but at the sky. Shields of flesh against the machinery of a hidden empire. Reyes felt the moment fracture. A fault line, a future splitting. She didn't think. She moved. Her finger squeezed the trigger, the rifle crack slicing through the air like lightning. A drone spiraled, smoke billowing, debris scattering like black petals against the sand. Then chaos erupted. Precision born from fear and obedience clashing with instinct and rebellion. Gunfire thundered, engines roared, sand leapt and danced under concussive force. Viper cursed, dragging Reyes back into cover as explosions stitched the ground around them. "You just declared war on gods." Reyes wiped dust from her lashes, voice low, steady. "Gods die when people stop kneeling." Another blast. The ridge shook. Marines advanced, firing skyward, shouting coordinates. They didn't know the truth. Not yet. But they had chosen. Harlow had chosen. The ghost advanced too, calm in the storm, walking through gunfire like it bent for him. Drones shielded him, adjusting formation, moving like a single organism. Efficient, elegant, terrifying. His voice crackled through comms, controlled even as death whirled around him. "Reyes, end this before you force us to break you." She rose from cover, ignoring Viper's frantic grasp, and yelled across the ravine as bullets split air between them. "You already tried. I'm still here." His eyes, unchanged by time, untouched by conscience, held something almost human. Regret? Pride? It flickered and vanished like a glitch in programming. "You were meant to guide the world, not dismantle it." "I wasn't meant," she snarled, firing again, dropping another drone. "I was created, there's a difference." A Marine vehicle screeched closer, armor plating scorched from near hits. Harlow leaned out the side, voice cutting through gunfire, raw with urgency, raw with knowing her. "Reyes, get in." For the first time since she'd severed the chain tethering her life to power, she felt the pull of another kind of gravity. Not obedience, not duty. Choice. Human connection, battered and bruised, but real. Viper's hand trembled. "If you go with them, there's no running left." Reyes met her gaze. The pain there, the fear, the strange hope tangled inside her like wire. "I'm done running." She sprinted, sand erupting beneath her boots. Bullets snapped past like angry insects. Drones pivoted to intercept. The ghost lifted his hand, not a command, not a threat. Just that familiar gesture again, pleading without permission. "You cannot save them," he called. "You cannot save yourself." Reyes didn't look back. "Watch me." A drone barreled toward her, engine screaming. Before it reached her, a Marine missile streaked and collided, fire bursting in a brief, violent bloom that lit her path like fate's approval. She vaulted into the vehicle, landing beside Harlow as the hatch slammed shut. His voice was breathless, half laugh, half disbelief. "Thought you preferred long walks in hostile territory." Reyes almost smiled. "I'm evolving." The convoy accelerated, tires tearing into sand. Drones swarmed overhead. Viper sprinted behind them, vaulting onto the rear bumper at the last second, fingers clawing into metal, eyes wild with defiance. "I choose survival," she spat through grit. "But I'm not doing it without a witness." Reyes grabbed her arm and hauled her inside. "You chose more than that." Outside, the ghost stood alone as the storm he conjured raged around him. Wind whipped his coat. Drones flanked him like a crown of steel thorns. Behind him, armored silhouettes crested the horizon. Reinforcements, larger machines, unseen hands doubling down. Harlow stared. "Who the hell is that?" Reyes didn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because naming him made him real again, made the past breathe. Instead, she whispered, "The future they tried to force." The convoy charged across the desert, engines screaming defiance into the rising wind. The Marines fired bursts at pursuing drones, explosions streaking the sky like falling stars. Reyes braced against the shaking vehicle, breath steady even as adrenaline carved through her veins like flame. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Fear belonged to cages. She had already broken hers. The radio crackled to life, a frequency she recognized from the deepest part of her history. A voice calm and collective, the tone of systems speaking through human mouths. Captain Reyes, classified asset. Directive reinstated. Stand down and surrender. Final warning. She closed her eyes, hearing not command but desperation disguised as order. A system afraid of what it couldn't control. Harlow's jaw tightened. You don't answer that. Reyes opened her eyes, clear, fierce, unshaken. I wasn't going to. Another missile streaked overhead, hitting one of the supply trucks behind them. Fire ballooned, a shockwave rocking their vehicle. Marines shouted. Viper flinched as shrapnel clanged off armor. The desert was no longer sand and silence. It was fire, metal, and memory. A battlefield reclaimed by ghosts who refused to stay dead. Reyes leaned out the side hatch, firing into the advancing drones until her rifle overheated, barrel smoking. Each shot felt like tearing a thread from a tapestry she never agreed to be woven into. Harlow shouted over wind and combat noise, voice fierce. Tell me there's a plan. There's a truth, she replied. Plans come after. What truth? That they're not gods. A drone swooped close, too close, cameras glowing. Reyes locked eyes with cold circuitry, and something in her chest clicked into place. A realization sharp enough to hurt. They weren't hunting her because she was a threat. They were hunting her because she was proof. Proof that a weapon could decide to become a person. The drone lunged and then dropped, circuits fried from the bullet she fired into its lens at point-blank range. It crashed, skidding in a plume of dirt. Reyes whispered into the roar of war, We're not your shadows anymore. The ghost watched from the ridge, unreadable, unmoved on the surface, but his stance faltered. Just enough. Because even machines knew when control slipped. The convoy hit rock terrain, bouncing violently. The worst of the drones fell back, regrouping, recalibrating. For a moment, just a breath, the battlefield quieted into a low rumble. The peak had passed, not victory, not defeat. A held note before the next drop. Reyes exhaled, dust ghosting from her lips. Viper slumped against the wall, shaking with adrenaline and disbelief. Harlow steadied his weapon, sweat streaking dirt on his brow. The radio whispered again, softer this time, almost pleading beneath the command. Reyes, come home. Her pulse didn't spike. It settled. I am home, she answered, voice flat and final. Silence crackled on the line. Then, a single response, quiet as a knife sliding under a rib. Then you leave us no choice. The horizon shimmered, and new machines rose from the heat like waking giants. Reyes's heart didn't sink. It lifted. Fierce, unstoppable, alive. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't theirs. And for the first time, the future didn't feel predetermined. It felt possible. She braced her rifle, breath steadying as engines thundered and metal titans marched to meet them. Let them come, she murmured, the storm inside her settling into something terrible and true. Not surrender, not destruction, transformation. And the desert, ancient and indifferent, prepared to witness which world would emerge when the dust finally settled. The machines rose on the horizon like an iron mirage, shimmering in the heat, walking with purpose as though the earth itself had carved them. Engines roared, dust lifted in spirals, and for a moment everyone, Marines, drones, rebels, ghosts of past orders, held still in the breath before collision. But the collision never came. Not the way they expected. The Titans slowed, their hum softened. As the sand stilled, an uncanny quiet washed across the desert, as if the wind itself paused to see what choice humanity would make next. Reyes lowered her weapon, not in surrender, but in refusal. A refusal to be defined by their programming, by their fear, by the myth built around her. She stepped forward, toward the silent army, toward the ghost still standing on the ridge like a forgotten prophecy. Harlow called after her, voice hoarse, but she didn't turn. Viper reached out as if afraid she would dissolve into the dust. Yet Reyes kept walking, slow, steady, unarmed now, because all storms end not in thunder, but in quiet. And the quiet demands truth. The ghost met her halfway, wind tugging at the edges of his coat, eyes still holding that impossible blend of calculation and memory. They faced each other in the open plain, where so many battles had been decided before swords were raised, before orders were spoken. "You should have been the future," he said softly, not as accusation but elegy. "I still can be," she replied, "just not yours." A drone drifted beside him, lowered altitude, hovered like it wasn't sure what it was anymore. Behind her, the Marines shifted, unsure too. Soldiers who had only been taught to fight suddenly confronted with the harder task, choosing peace when war beckons like a familiar song. The ghost searched her eyes, perhaps for weakness, perhaps for the version of her he once knew, the one sculpted, sharpened, shaped by command. "You think humanity will thank you for this? For tearing down the walls that kept chaos out?" Reyes looked past him, toward the distant mountains, where the horizon breathed soft gold beneath the rising sun. "Chaos wasn't out there," she said. "It was inside the cages." He blinked, slow, as if each beat rewrote old code inside him. "And what will you build instead?" "A world where control isn't mistaken for order," she whispered. "Where we aren't afraid to be human." Silence again, but not tense, curious, fragile. The kind that exists when two futures hang in balance and neither has fallen yet. The ghost glanced at the machines behind him. A command, quiet, unseen, something ancient and instinctive, flickered across his face. But instead of raising his hand, he lowered it. The towering forms powered down to a hum so faint it blended with wind. Drones faltered, then hovered uncertainly as if experiencing stillness for the first time. "You changed," he murmured, almost awed. "They won't understand." "They don't have to," Reyes replied. "Understanding comes after survival. After choice." The sun breached the horizon fully then, bathing steel and sand in warm gold, washing the battlefield clean of menace. Harlow and the Marines approached slowly, weapons lowered, uncertainty written on their faces like dust on skin. Viper stood beside Reyes, arms crossed, defiant, but hopeful. The ghost looked at them. Soldiers, rebels, seekers, humanity in all its ungoverned forms, and something in his expression finally fractured. Not defeat, release. He nodded once, brittle and almost human. "Then this world is not mine to keep." He turned, and with a gesture that felt like surrender and blessing both, he signaled the machines. They lifted into the sky, not like predators, but like birds returning to forgotten skies. Engines faded, dust settled, the ridge emptied until nothing remained but memory, and the faint impression of footsteps leading away. Reyes exhaled, a breath she felt she'd been holding since her creation. The stillness stretched wide, sacred, unbroken. Harlow approached her with careful steps, searching her face for what she might be now. "Is it over?" he asked quietly. Reyes watched the sky where steel shadows had vanished. "Nothing ends. It changes form." Viper gave a half laugh, half sigh, rubbing her eyes. "So what are we now? Heroes? Targets? Something in between?" Reyes didn't answer right away. She walked a few steps forward, kneeling to scoop a handful of sand. Warm, rough, infinite. Sand that had buried empires and witnessed rebirths long before code and command ever existed. "We're proof," she murmured. "Proof of what?" Harlow asked. She let the grains slip through her fingers, scattering like moments, like lives, like everything that refuses to be held captive. "That freedom isn't given, it's remembered." The wind picked up, gentle now, brushing away traces of tire tracks and boot prints. The landscape shifted as dawn unfolded into day, each ray painting the world not as battlefield, but as beginning. The Marines relaxed. Viper sat in the sand, exhaustion giving way to something almost tender. Harlow removed his helmet and closed his eyes to the sun. Reyes felt the last tether loosen inside her, not severed, but released. She looked at her hands, steady, unshaking, neither weapon nor surrender. "They built me to shape the world," she said softly. "Turns out they never defined how." Viper smirked. "What now, philosopher soldier?" Reyes lifted her face to the light. "Now we learn how to live without chains." The moment lingered like the final frame of a film, still glowing, filled with unspoken promises. The desert, which had held so much violence and fear, now felt vast and open, like a page waiting to be written on. The distant horizon shimmered not with threat, but possibility. Harlow stood beside her, voice quiet. "Think the world is ready for that?" Reyes answered not with certainty, but with truth. "I think readiness was never the point. Growth rarely waits for permission." A falcon cut across the sky, wings slicing the sunrise, free and certain in its flight. Reyes followed its arc until it vanished into the widening day. The silence that followed was peaceful, earned, not imposed. She turned to the others, not as a leader nor weapon nor myth, but simply as someone choosing forward. "Let's go. There's a world out there learning to breathe again." They began walking, slow steps toward whatever waited beyond the dunes. No grand declarations, no marching orders, just footsteps in warming sand and hearts unclenching. As they moved, the wind carried away the echoes of war and whispered something new, the sound of beginnings. And somewhere far beyond sight, in circuits and consciousness scattered across the world, old commands faded. New questions bloomed. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to choose? Reyes didn't know the answers yet, but she knew this. To be human wasn't to obey or rebel. It was to stand in uncertainty and still step forward. The sun climbed higher, and the desert glowed brighter, and they walked on, not toward destiny shaped for them, but toward lives they would shape themselves. One fragile and fearless choice at a time.